All right, good evening. I'd like to call to order the working session for February 24th, 2026. Just as a reminder, the meetings of the Mechanicsburg Area School District Board of Directors are being recorded and live streamed for the purpose of transparency and increased public access. The live stream, along with recordings from previous meetings, are available and can be found on the school board's YouTube channel. At this point, we will move into the first area being athletics 2.01, track team proposal for the middle school.
Yeah, every once in a while we're able to begin to look at the offerings that we have for students and look at and explore some new opportunities for our students. So this is one that has been on the periphery of our attention for a little while now, but we've been able to gain some traction. No pun intended there.
Nice.
Although it wasn't intended.
We work on that one.
Yeah. It really is, sorry. And we're excited to be able to talk about it a little bit here this evening. We do have policy that pretty specifically governs what this process should look like. So Mr. Pahanik's going to take us through that. Throw things over to him.
All right, thanks for having me. For those that have been here for a few terms, I guess we'll say, is I've presented new sports or new programs in the past. For those that haven't been here, Dr. Bitts referenced our policy. It's 123.3, I believe. Really the first threshold is, does the PIAA recognize it and does the Mid-Penn recognize it? Mid-Penn middle school track is recognized by the Mid-Penn and the PIAA, so it meets our first prong. We also have prongs that are such as student interest. We have had many families, students express interest in this. There's things like facilities. Are there Title IX implications? I could go through all the prongs, but basically they're all met within middle school track. So really what's next is sort of what that looks like for our school, for the Mid-Penn, and for your approval. So I surveyed I'll call it our community, and we do have many student athletes that are interested in this. If you look at our cross-country program at the middle school level, it's not necessarily a direct reflection, or it doesn't necessarily mean that there are different events, but I would say it's a similar group of student athletes, and our numbers at the middle school cross-country program are significant. We are actually the largest Mid-Penn school that does not have middle school track currently. So all of these things that are kind of coming to the forefront are reasons that we feel strongly about bringing this forward for the next cycle, which is spring of 27 and 28. That's sort of how the Mid-Penn looks at the sports calendar. I have notified our booster club about potentially this coming on board. They are excited about this. They are ready to support it from their end. So that would be one piece of the puzzle that I feel good about and would be part of this equation. So no hurdles there. Like I said, it is the largest. We are the largest school that does not have it. Our track and field program at the high school level does have significant participation, but I feel like this would be a step in the right direction. Most of our successful programs have a natural feeder program, and that feeder program is our middle school. So this would just be another avenue for them to maybe, we'll say, develop at a younger age. I have notified the Mid-Penn about potentially this coming forward. We schedule on a 2-year basis, so they have tentatively put our school in the schedule for the next 2 years. So this would be the natural time to approve it from our end, and it would work on the Mid-Penn side of it as well. We would need to obviously find coaches. We would go through a process just like we would any other sport. We would post the positions, do interviews, and hopefully have a staff. I have ideas as far as what that support would look like for the amount of events that are participating in the middle school. I'm hoping for 3, we'll call it paid stipends, a head coach with 2 assistants to support. I'll be honest, I don't know what numbers we're going to have. I feel like this could be a very strongly participated program, anywhere, I would say on the low side 40 to 50, and I could see this going probably even higher than that. So it would be a trial run maybe the first 2 years and maybe adjust it if need be, but I'd like to see what it looks like for the next spring. I think Mr. Hoffman has presented, but we would need to do some work at the middle school track. Right now we have a cinder track up there. Our thoughts would be to practice at the middle school after school and hopefully have our track and field meets up at the high school at the new track. We have to see how some of the logistics work with that and the scheduling, but that is what our initial plan would be as far as what that looks like. Outside of that, I haven't even been going forward, I'm sorry.
You're doing such a good job.
Yeah. So the next steps, what budget implications we would have an initial startup. Mr. Hoffman, I think, presented a couple months ago, but the refurbish is around $25,000. And then we would need to have initial uniforms for this group, which would be $10,000. And then we're looking at yearly expenditures at $13,000. So that would include our coaching stipends, our transportation, our officials' fees. Track and field does a lot of invitations, so those would be our invitational fees. And then we would try to do uniforms every 5 years like we do for every other athletic program. So those are rough estimates as far as budget implications. Questions? Yeah?
Does the middle school track and field, does that include like jumping and weights?
So it is a abbreviated, no pole vault. There's not as many field events. There are some, but not as many. But it's an abbreviated track and field schedule. Good question. So what next steps would look like? Bringing this to you today, we would obviously need to also coincide with the middle school track refurbish. I don't think if this was approved, we would go forward with that, or vice versa. And then our budget, the budget that I submitted to Mr. Longwell does include middle school track currently, so that would be part of the approval process here this spring. And then once approved, we would post positions probably the end of the school year this summer. Hopefully have somebody in place before the start of next school year. Any questions on middle school track? Yes?
Yes, would this be an after-school activity or during?
Yes, so our middle school programs are basketball does vary because of only one gymnasium, but all our middle school programs practice really 3:45 to 5:45. So that would be that's what I would anticipate happening with this. It's difficult for that age group to get home and then get rides back. Sometimes a little bit easier for a high school, but we try to practice right after school so they're not coming back.
It's the spring season.
It is a spring season, correct. And there are other spring sports. I don't know how that's going to impact. We have spring soccer, we have spring volleyball. I would think there's probably student athletes that they would be interested in all of them. At some point they do choose at high school, but that is something we're thinking about that I don't know if that would pull from other sports, but it is a spring sport.
I think one of the best indicators, and obviously Seth mentioned the cross-country participation, which if you've ever been to a middle school cross-country meet, you know that our team is far and away larger than pretty much any other team that we ever compete against. But we also have a track club, which the rec department and some of your own children, I think, have participated in that. They've done that for quite a while, and that does go a little bit younger than what this team would do, but that track club has well over 100 participants.
So they were notified, spoke with the recreation department. They would probably adjust maybe their age groups based off of that, but they do go younger than, just so everybody's aware, the PIAA recognizes 7th and 8th grade, so this would just be 7th and 8th grade students. It would not be 6th graders, and then the track program within the rec department goes even below 6th grade.
But definitely an indicator that, again, in addition to the other data points that Seth pointed out, there's a good amount of interest out there.
It's a great idea. I've seen lots of kids participate in that club program too. It's a good opportunity for kids.
It's been great for my kids, other than double that, which is not volleyball, but
Yeah, it's a fair point.
What type of work would need to be done at the middle school?
At the track.
Yeah.
So we need to widen it. We would probably, Mr. Hoffman, I think our cinders would be replaced. We had new cinders coming in, but I would say widening it is probably the biggest piece of it. And right now we're tentatively scheduled for the summer if everything's approved to make that happen. And I think it's only, what's it take, a week?
Yeah.
2 weeks.
It's cross country in the fall.
Well, yeah, middle school
So
and
then they
high
could
school are both in the fall,
track
correct?
in the spring.
Correct. Yes.
I'd be curious in your survey results, do you anticipate or did you find, would the addition of track just create another opportunity for athletes already participating in sports? Or is it gonna bring in additional athletes to participate in sports?
It's a fair question. I would say limited sharing of athletes, that there would be significant amount of student athletes that are not participating for a school team in the spring that would participate within this group. Dr. Bitts is a track and field expert. Would you tend to agree with that?
Yes, I would. I think particularly at the middle school level, you've got some advantages with track and field, which we also typically see with our football teams, frankly, is the two places, which is no cuts. Generally, again, very generally, I feel like when you look at our football teams and our track and field teams, you see the best alignment with our student body as a whole in terms of great diversity of participants. Again, will we definitely see that here in middle school track? We'll see, but I think all signs point to that.
And I think it's really great about the track program, at least with the rec department, is that it gets these kids together outside of school, prepares them for high school. They have friends that they can already know if they join the track team, and so it has value even outside of athletics.
It is a very inclusive sport, and
Just a pair of sneakers. That's all you need.
and obviously it takes a special athlete to do it, but I do think there is a place for just about anybody that's interested.
So looking ahead, we are, in order to try and make sense of the order of things, because obviously there's a few parallel trains to this, we were looking to present and have you vote to approve the addition of the sport then at the next meeting. And then we would come back after that to do the official second reading with Mr. Hoffman of the track refurbishment, and then vote on the track refurbishment. And then, of course, you'll be voting through the budget for the actual expenses. So kind of a three-part approval there that would ultimately land us with having it for next week.
So are there any concerns about moving this forward to something we'll vote on in the upcoming meeting? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much, sir.
Those girls are winning.
I know.
Yeah, go check
Everybody,
them.
Yeah, go.
tune into the live stream. We got a big game tonight.
Okay.
After the meeting.
After the meeting. I'm waiting for Dr. Bowman to start.
Yeah, that's right.
If I was loud, I might have it on.
Okay, thank you. We will move on to item 3, which is budget and finance, and the first item in there is medical insurance trending. Dr. Bitts.
Yeah, so I'll get us started and then pass the clicker to Mr. Longwell. I'll get started by saying that this, of course, kind of is a precursor to our next couple of meetings where we'll talk about the budget. Tonight we want to talk about the trends that we're seeing in healthcare, but I think it's important that we start off by acknowledging that this is an uncomfortable presentation. It's uncomfortable to present. It's uncomfortable to critically ask questions and discuss, because the reality is that when you're talking about healthcare, you're talking about people's choices, their health, their lives in a lot of cases. So it feels on questions be critical because it feels like you're critiquing the decisions that people have made about their health, and that's just not a comfortable thing. So I think it's important that we right off the bat at least say, and hopefully it's felt as we go through it, that it's important that we stay objective with the data, and that we truly aren't making any kind of judgments or decisions about the healthcare that people have chosen, or the medications that they've chosen to take. I'm a doctor, but not the kind that's going to make those kinds of decisions or judgments. Again, maybe in summary, I would just say that we go into this presentation with the best of intentions, and hopefully we can assume the best of intentions of each other as we navigate again, a challenging conversation. But we do have to look at the data objectively, not only because it's our regular job in terms of the budget process, but because of some of the things that you're going to see in the ensuing slides here. And from a 50,000-foot view, I think that this slide really, if you kind of remember nothing else, this is maybe the slide that shows you what's been happening. You can see we've got some 5-year benchmarks here going from 2010 to 2015 to 2020 to 2025 in terms of the medical insurance spending that we as a district have been making. In 2010, you can see it was just above $4 million. Over that next 5-year period, we rose by a little bit over $1 million, to be at about 5.3. In that next 5-year period of time, we rose about $2 million from 5.3 to somewhere around 7.3. And in the most recent 5 years, we have doubled that. We've gone from about 17.3 to what is projected to be a little over $14 million. So what was a $1 million increase over 5 and then a $2 million increase over 5 has now doubled in the last 5 years. And Mr. Longwell is going to take us through a lot more details than that. But again, that gives you a little bit of a snapshot of what exactly we're seeing in terms of trending data.
Thank you.
So I appreciate Dr. Bitz's summary there on the last slide, giving you kind of a look at what was happening in a snapshot form over 5-year intervals, right? We wanted to then take a little deeper dive and share what made up those individual years over that same time period. And so if you look at kind of year 0 there, or year 1, that 2009, 2010, I know the print's a little small, so I apologize, but that's the first kind of data point. And then you follow that all the way across to 2025, 26, which is the estimate that we shared is about $14.5 million is what we're expecting to see in terms of total medical expense as we move through this current fiscal year. So for perspective's sake, I thought I would just kind of call out a couple things here that maybe this chart tells me or that I look at as I look at the data. From 2009-10 to about 2021-22, in any one of those years, either medical was increasing by maybe 400,000 or 500,000, 600,000, 700,000, or you can see there were some dips or even leveled off. So we would sometimes have, somewhat of an increase followed by, maybe a leveling off, or even in a couple of those years, a little bit of a decrease. Ultimately, from that 9-10 to 21-22, if you looked at any 3 years or 5 years or 7 years taken together, depending on where you wanted to move those dials, generally our average yearly increase was like 5%, 6%, 7%, 8%, and we'll take a look at that on the next slide. But that was kind of like our running average, right? What we had seen historically during that long period of time, ultimately 13 years. In fact, in that 13-year period of time up to 2021-22, there was only 1 or 2 years where the annual year-over-year increase was above $1 million or around $1 million. So then you fast forward to 22-23, and you can see how sharply the line goes upward. So in 22-23, as we move forward into that next year, we saw a big sharp increase, about $2.3 million. We would have hoped to see then maybe a leveling off or a decline. We had seen that trend for many years before that. Instead, we followed that up with another sharp increase of about $1.8 million in year-over-year increase, which was about another 17% increase in year-over-year. And then to kind of fast forward to 2025-26, again, hoping that, where's that leveling off, maybe a decrease. We're following that up with another, probably it looks like $1.7 or $1.8 million year-over-year increase, so another 14 or 15%. And so what we had seen for a very long time, the smoothing out of medical expenses of 6, 7, 8% on average per year In the last 3 years, it's been more like 27%, 17%, and now 14 or 15%. And so those averages, we're seeing a sharp uptick in costs. And frankly, that you translate that to raw dollars, it is now at over 2 million, 1.8 million, 1.7 million in those last 3 years in terms of actual dollars. The other thing I wanted to just highlight here quickly, as we look at medical expenses, as the expense climbs the way it is, and we've shared this with the board over the years, medical was always our third biggest line item in the budget, so salaries, pension, and then medical. Medical is now surpassing pension, so it will be our second biggest line item in the budget, behind salaries, of course. There's a lot going on in this slide, so I'll just unpack this for a minute and let you kind of digest here. The first thing I would draw your attention to is you can see the years down the left-hand side. The very next column to the right is the total medical spend, and I talked a little bit about that on the last slide. So you can see in 2009-10, as Dr. Bitz shared earlier in the presentation, we started around $3.5 million, $4 million, and then you can see it kind of increased subtly, well, 5, 6, 7, 8%, depending on the years, up until we hit that 22-23, where we're highlighting those in yellow, and you can see that sharp climb from 22-23 to 24-25 and to 25-26. So those are kind of our annual costs per year for medical. The next column beside that is the year-over-year percent change, and so that's interesting to me because you can look and see we did have some pretty big percentage increases, but they were almost always followed by a flattening or a decrease. And so from a budgeting perspective, when we would look back 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years and say, well, what's the average increase over that period of time? Because you might have a big increase, but then the next year you might not have much of an increase at all. So what's that smoothing out of the average? That's what's happening in those columns beside it. So in any given year, when we look at medical, Mrs. Ely, myself, with Dr. Bitz, we're saying, what's kind of the average trend over a period of years? And so what I mean by that, I'll just pick as an example 2022-23. So if you follow with me, in 2022-23, our total medical spend was $8,595,000 and not 8,595,463. That we were coming off of really a flat, a 0% increase from the year before that at 8.6. But in that moment, when you look at the last 3 years, the average annual increase, the average annual growth rate was about 6.2%. The 4-year average annual growth rate was 4.2% per year. The average annual growth rate for the 5-year trend was 7.5% per year, and then so on and so forth. You can see the 7-year and the 10-year trend. Those trends are helpful because it just kind of points to, well, if you look for that smoothing effect, what's the average annual increase? And so when we've talked with our medical consultant over the years, they've always advised us in that 8-9% range in terms of what you might expect in terms of year-over-year increases, and I think the trend data points to that when you look at it. So for those 13 years beyond 2002-23, we were seeing, depending on the years and the benchmarks you choose, you can see some years in there where the average annual was 4 or 5%, or maybe 6% or 7%. Many of those highlighted cells, the blue and green, show benchmarks at those lower percentage rates. Then you kind of reach 22-23, you're looking at 24-25, 25-26, and you can see all those benchmarks then turn into the red. The red is anything above 10%. And so at those benchmarks now, you can see the average annual increase is reaching 12, 14, 15, 18%, and really they're being pulled up by those last 2 or 3 years that you see there, where medical insurance went from $8,595,000 to $10,922,000 to $12,737,000 to $14,500,000. And in those three years basically of increases, we weren't seeing a leveling off at all or a decrease. We just saw that line continue upward in a sharp trend. So a few other observations very quickly. You can see in kind of the purple pink shaded there, it took probably 10 or 11 years for medical insurance to double from 2011-12 to 2021-22. So what I'm looking at there is that 3.6 million almost doubling to 8.6. So in that 10 or 11 years, it took to double. So in the last 4 years, you can see we're on track to double in basically 4 or 5 years. So we're really accelerating the pace at which the expense is increasing, going from 10 or 11 years to double to 4 or 5 years to double. So this is some of what we've been looking at administratively as we try to say, well, what's the story behind medical? You know, where's that trend heading? And some of the challenge, frankly, with medical is in any given year, you're working to assess the current year of medical and project out, well, what's, in this case, 25, 26. So where do we think 25, 26 is going to be in terms of total medical spend? We're simultaneously then trying to also project out to say, okay, well, where's 26, 27 heading? And when you see historically, it was always in that average annual 7, 8, 9%. But now we're seeing double-digit increases, which is going to certainly adjust our thinking around the medical side of the budget as we enter our conversations with the board in March about medical spending and the types of budget adjustments we may need. So medical cost growth and the direct impact on fund balance, as we shared with the board, 2024-25 is our last completed fiscal year. We completed that in June 30, and then through the fall worked with our auditors to kind of finalize the numbers, make sure all the accruals were booked, kind of look at how did we do in the year. We actualized a deficit of about $2.3 million. And in that conversation, I think the single largest factor was medical costs, alone almost accounting for almost all of the deficit. And so that's part of the story, I think, when you look at 24-25 and say, well, we had a deficit in that year. What caused the deficit? Certainly there's overs and unders across the entirety of the budget, but the single biggest factor is that medical. If you pull that out and kind of trend that forward, had it trended forward at 7 or 8%, we would be having a different conversation as far as how 24-25 would have ended, much closer to break even or break even, frankly. Another piece that we want to talk about with respect to 2024-25, just to provide some additional context, is you can see the year before that in the first column in terms of actual general operating medical. So that was about 10.9 million. In 24-25, we saw that increase to 12.7. So I talked a little bit earlier about that $2.8 million increase. So in that year alone, from 23-24 to 24-25, I'm sorry, 1.8 million. We saw a $1.8 million increase in actual medical expenses. You can see our salaries in 23-24, 24-25 increased by $2.3 million. But the note there at the bottom, I want to just add a little bit of context. That $2.3 million increase in salaries includes the contractual increases, which approximate about 3%, but we also made staff additions as part of the budget process. So the piece there I just want to call out is, if you think about the salary base of $40 million there in 24-25, 3% of that would be about $1.2 million. I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you, but the piece that I think about there as I crosswalk, well, if across our entire school district it costs about $1.2 million to increase salaries on that $40 million base, you can see medical is actually exceeding the annual cost of giving out raises of up to 3% for our staff. And that trend would certainly have held because, like I said, in 23-24, 24-25, and 25-26, those cost increases on an annual basis for medical exceeded salary increases in all 3 of those years because they were at $1.7 million, $1.8 million, and ultimately $2.3 million. So one of the key takeaways there is that healthcare growth is continuing to materially impact the total cost associated with personnel. I know that medical is something we typically talk about as part of our budget process toward the end of March, but I think just given how drastically it's increasing, we wanted to kind of pull it out separately and talking with Dr. Bitts and Cabinet as a team to say, well, I think we need to spend a little more time with the school board to talk very specifically about medical, why it's increasing, and where do we see, that heading as we continue our conversations into March with our budget discussions. So we've talked about the numbers and we quantified what the increases were. I think the question that immediately comes to mind is, well, why are we seeing such large increases? I think there's a variety of factors, but I would kind of boil them down, at least in my mind, to 3 primary areas. One is we're seeing a higher number of higher dollar claimants. And so that's this slide. So if you bear with me, that's the first of the 3 reasons. And what I mean by that is These are claimants that are above $150,000 individually. So you can see in some of those older years there, 2021, we didn't have as many claimants above $150,000. You fast forward to the 2 or 3 years where we're talking about seeing those big increases in 23, 24, 24, 25, and 25, 26, you see a higher volume, a higher number of individuals that are going above, they're breaching that $150,000 threshold where they're high dollar claimants, and we're tracking them. We track them with our consultant because ultimately we have a stop loss policy that kicks in at $300,000. So anything above $300,000 in the individual claimant level, we do get reimbursements for. So it's an extra layer of protection for the school district, but that's also helping to tell the story here that we do have claimants that are, higher dollar, higher number, higher frequency. And I would even call attention to 2025-26, and I think you can see this in some of the other columns too. Not only do we have a higher number of claimants going above $150,000, the numbers at which they're reaching those higher dollars is also increasing. So you can see a claimant on there for $646,000 in 2025-26. You can see one at $380,000, and then in the prior years, you saw more in the 100s and 200s perhaps. There is one in there, and I'll point out this slide and the next slide don't marry up perfectly because this is on actual stop loss basis. I don't want to, get way. We talk about that probably the rest of the evening, but we won't. But that $300,000 attachment point in different of these years with our consultant, we've adjusted the way the stop loss policy is overlays our school year and our calendar year. So all that said, we did have another $700,000 claimant in 1 or 2 years prior to that. So we're just seeing very high dollar claimants in terms of numbers, but also at the value or the cost associated with those individual claimants. The second area that I wanted to mention, so I said the 3 areas. The first was those high dollar claimants, but also the claimants that are more moderate in terms of costs. Those above $10,000, we're also seeing the frequency of those increase. And so by way of context, this chart is showing us the number of people that fall into these buckets of if you're a claimant between $10,000 and $49,999, if you're a claimant between $50,000 and $74,999. And you can kind of look across those 4 years and you can see roughly how many claimants we had in each of those categories. So for me, I think the highlight I would probably share with the board here is if you look at the bottom, those last 3 rows, you can see totals of everything above categorized by here's the total number of people over 10,000, here's the total number of people above 50,000, and here's the total number of people above 150,000. And so very quickly, above 10,000, you can see we had 164 in 2022-23. Then the next year that rose to 208, and then that rose to 240. And talking with our healthcare consultant, we expect the 2025-26, which you see that's a year to date, so we're not the whole way through our fiscal year yet. We expect that 174 will meet or exceed the 240 that we saw in 2024-25. So, and when you're looking at those more moderate claimants and high dollar claimants taken together, just the sheer volume of them has increased. Similarly, if you look at the total above 50,000 and the total above 150,000, I think you see ultimately the same trend there where in that base year, you see 35 and 5 and then increasing into the 40s with some of those very high dollar claimants above, 7, 8, 9. And we're likewise on track for 25-26 to see those above 50 and those above 150 either meet or exceed what we ultimately realized in 2024-25. So the first 2 of the 3 factors that I mentioned was one, just the sheer number of the very high dollar claimants. The second factor was the volume of the larger, more moderate claimants. The third area is in the area of specialty drug. So we think about, well, why did medical increase? Well, there's higher dollar claimants, there's more high dollar claimants, and we also have a lot of specialty drug increases in terms of cost. So probably a lot to look at on this slide. I just highlighted in yellow just to try to draw our attention. If you look at the bottom, and for perspective's sake, this is a year-to-date analysis, and so our consultant ran from February 2024 through January 2025. That's the first column there. and then compared that for the same time period from February 2025 to January 2026 to try to get like a rolling 12-month comparison, right? Year over year to see what's really happening. What I would draw your attention to is the total at the very bottom. You can see that prior 12-month, kind of the base year, was about $2.9 million in specialty, $2.9 million in all of drug costs. The next column over is 3.9 million, and so that shows $1 million increase in prescription drug costs in that period of analysis being analyzed. I would then draw your attention to the line above it that says all other drugs. So they start to parse out here the top 20 or so drugs are the drugs that we spend with more frequency and more cost, and then they've just categorized kind of in all other drugs to capture all of the other prescriptions in the plan. So if you add all of them up from top to bottom, they equal 2.9 million and 3.9 million. I say all that to say, if all the other drugs, excluding the ones above that are individually listed, it increased only from 1,579,000 to 1,622,000, that means that the $1 million increase that we talked about in specialty drugs is in those 20 or so drugs that are listed individually. Within that, I would say those 20 or so specialty drugs are either maybe an acute issue where it's something significant but maybe more short term. It could be more of a maintenance drug where it's something that's more ongoing. And thirdly, I would say some of those on the list are also GLP-1 drugs. And so in fairness, as you kind of say, well, the $1 million increase across these top 20 drugs, what is that? What types of drugs are they? I would generally categorize them into those three areas of something acute, something more of a maintenance, and then something more specific to GLP-1 drugs for weight loss indication. So as we kind of unpack that a little further and think about GLP-1 drugs for weight loss indication, I share that point because GLP-1 can be used for diabetes indication or it can be used for weight loss indication. I recognize this chart has a lot of numbers on it as well, and so I just tried to kind of highlight the yellow. That's one of the big takeaways, I think, as we look at this with the school board. The weight loss indication, you can see in 2023, about $35,000 in weight loss indication. When you look at 2024, that increased to $252,000 approximately. And then when you look at 2025, we saw that increase to $620,000. And so you see some year-over-year increases of greater than 100% there, highlighted in the last column. And again, I think differentiating between the highlighted is the weight loss indication versus you can see the line above it is diabetes indication, where the diabetes indication may have had some increases, but not nearly at the rate in terms of percentage or in terms of dollar increases year over year as what we were seeing in terms of weight loss. So again, I think as we talk about medical costs and that significantly increasing year over year trend we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years, and try to unpack that a little bit, it really does come back to just the number of very high dollar claimants above 150,000. Secondly, the total volume of claimants above 10,000, the more moderate, I'll say. And then ultimately, thirdly, what's happening around specialty drugs, where we're seeing, maybe the top 20 or so drugs contributing over $1 million in year over year when you look at that, those 2 periods of time. In terms of medical expense, this is just, again, kind of going back to our chart that we started the presentation with. Again, from 2009-10 to about 21-22, 13 years or so, almost all of those years where you see increases probably were more like 500,000, 600,000, 700,000. Some of the years we were seeing a plateau or maybe even a slight decrease. The issue that we've really encountered now is we're going to see in 25-26 a 3-year sustained trend above 10%. And when you look at those years, they really are 27% increase, 17% increase, and a 14 or 15% increase. And the reason I shared about healthcare being the second biggest line item in our budget, that's challenged when we put the budget together, because if our second biggest line item in the budget's increasing by 27%, 17%, 15%, it's going to put some pressure on the budget versus like an equipment line item. If it's a $100,000 equipment line item, it goes up 17%. I mean, don't get me wrong, that's a number, but it's not going to put a lot of pressure on the budget process versus seeing these sustained increases better than $1 million, and frankly, almost closer to 2 on average over these last 2 or 3 years.
Okay, so I just want to clear up something. Are you saying that the $1.8 million increase is due to an increase in the district having to pay insurance premiums or covering the actual prescription costs?
I'm glad you asked. So maybe I should have started there even, maybe toward the start of the presentation. As a school district, we're self-insured. And so the way that works is we pay all actual claims. We do have Capital Blue Cross, but really we pay Capital to access their network and to access their negotiated rates that they have with providers. Beyond that, what Capital does is when a provider bills, if I go to the doctor, whatever the cost or procedure, they will send the bill to Capital. Capital will adjudicate the claim, apply the negotiated rates, but ultimately on a weekly basis, they pass all of those costs through to the school district. And so on a weekly basis, we're paying all of the actual claims submitted to the school district. So being self-insured, you always run the risk of you could have some very high dollar claimants, which is why we talked a little bit about stop loss there on the slide with those over 150,000. Once claimants reach above 150,000, we're kind of checking in to make sure if they hit that $300,000 level, we should be getting reimbursements above $300,000 for any individual that reaches that $300,000 attachment point.
Kind of like as an insurance
It's kind of like an insurance.
for us,
Yes.
for
yes.
the district,
Yeah, for the district, yes, exactly. To protect us against, something that's like maybe catastrophic or a really large shock claim. Ultimately, to your question though, when you think about then that $1.8 million or the year over 2 million, what's influencing that cost? Because we're paying actual claims, it's a combination of things of the specialty drugs going up the way they are. It's the total number of claimants above $10,000. Where we're seeing higher frequency of the number of people reaching those levels and higher in terms of actual costs incurred in a year. And then also the very high dollar claimants where we're seeing more people go across that $150,000 threshold as they approach that stop loss reimbursement point, which also is contributing to the cost. So, there are a variety of factors, but those are 3 of the biggest, I think, to that increase.
So who is setting the rates for those prescription drugs? Because is it Capital Blue Cross negotiating those rates?
It is. So the pharmacy companies are setting the rates, but there is negotiation between the Blues, Capital or Highmark or whomever. Within that negotiation, there's also some complexity in how our rebates pass through. So some groups, self-insured groups, will negotiate rebates on a per member per month, PMPM is what they refer that to. So Capital might say, we've negotiated with all these pharmacies, we will pass through to you a drug rebate per member per month based on that bucket of whatever the rebate is per member per month. That's one way. The other way that you can negotiate drug rebates where Capital can work with the pharmaceutical companies is Capital can just pass through the direct rebates right from the pharmaceutical companies. And so we get direct pass-through, but different schools have negotiated different arrangements. So the short answer, I guess, coming back to that is Capital's negotiating with the pharmaceutical companies. Within that, there is some negotiation around rebates, and then Capital's passing those rebates through dollar for dollar as they're negotiating on our behalf. And so Capital in a self-insured environment really has several purposes. One is those negotiations with pharmaceutical companies, how they pass the rebates through, but then also, as I mentioned earlier, we're kind of accessing their network, their contracted rates for what they've negotiated with physicians and providers and surgeons and things of that nature. Yeah.
I don't mind long answers.
What's that?
I don't mind long answers.
Sure.
Thank you.
Some observations I saw in there is, a lot of the specialty drugs are miracle drugs, and they are not all for GLP-1 and weight loss.
Sure.
Some of these are cancer drugs, MS, ALS, all that. Because I know. And the other thing I think that's, so I guess from that standpoint, like you said, you can't necessarily tell somebody you can't get cancer treatment, right? But the highest one on the list was a GLP-1. However, the other observation I saw is that as years go by, we have about, half of our employees on some kind, or spending more than $10,000 a year. Is that maybe 240? How many employees?
Yeah. So we probably have in the neighborhood of 700 employees, I would say. I would also suggest that if you think about very quickly, if you look at the weight loss, the 2023 year where there were 9 claimants and that increased to 78.
Okay.
For one year's worth of that weight loss indication, it's about $12,000.
Right.
So the minute someone gets prescribed that, they're probably getting picked up above that $10,000 tracking threshold. So said another way, when you look at the 164 increasing to 240, some of those numbers increasing is likely because of the GLP-1 drugs.
Yeah.
But I also think it's fair, to your point, when you look at the chart that shows the top 20 or so specialty drugs, that goes back to some of it is truly an acute illness, maybe a cancer of some kind. Some of it might be more of a maintenance drug that they have to be on for maybe the rest of their life or a very long period of time. Or thirdly, it could also be GLP-1. And so this is a 50,000-foot view to say, in these different buckets, how many claimants do we have? Because it's the frequency. Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Brooks.
No.
But then when you drill down a little further and say, well, what's causing some of this? I mean, certainly medical is an aspect of it, but also prescription drug is the other aspect. Then that takes you to the slide after that to say, well, of that prescription drug, that $1 million increase, some of it certainly is attributable to GLP-1, as we saw those big increases.
And it seems like Zepbound, for instance, seems to be the drug that people are choosing, where some other the drugs at the bottom of the chart are losing, traction, maybe falling out of favor or whatnot. So,
Sorry.
Can you clarify also, Mr. Longwell, claimants, do they include more than just employees?
So that's a good question. Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. So claimants would be all of those covered lives. That's a really important distinction. We have about 700 employees, not all of them. I mean, some large portion of them accept medical from the school district, but ultimately covered lives is more like 1,500 probably. Just thinking out loud in that neighborhood. And so when we think about claimants, there's probably something around 1,500 people on the medical plan. Some of them are employees, those 700, and then the other remaining, 800 or so people are spouses, children, things of that nature. And so when you then kind of look at that with this lens of claimant, it's the population really, the universe is about 1,500. And so then the numbers themselves are, in this case, you can see what the numbers are in relation to that 1,500.
yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Betts. That's great.
And then when one of these is prescribed by a doctor, is the insurance just like, okay, or is there any sort of like review or a pass through, like a Highmark or,
Sure.
would do?
I think some of it's up to plan design. There are some plans to be transparent. Some medical plans, whether it's in business or school districts, they might have different thresholds for which some of these medicines are prescribed. And then there's other, especially with weight loss indication in the school world, many schools are more in where we are in terms of if you go to your doctor and meet certain criteria, then you can be prescribed these. But there are within that higher thresholds that have been negotiated or changed in plan designs at other organizations. So.
There seems to be, because I'm on Ozempic for diabetes, and sorry, it would be darned. But I know my doctor would not prescribe it for weight loss. She was dead set against that. I don't know if that's an insurance thing where they just would not cover it and probably kick back and they ban it. But so there is some of that occurs. So I imagine there is some threshold.
You can get an app and find a doctor to prescribe it.
Exactly, yeah, you just find one with the lowest rating.
I think to that point, it probably would depend on the plan you're on, potentially. What does the plan prescribe in terms of those thresholds, which I think was a good question. Some might not have the same level of thresholds at which you can get prescribed these medicines versus others. Ultimately, a lot of plan design type questions, at least in the bargaining world, are something that you would have as part of those conversations.
I mean, obesity is a big issue, has a lot of health side effects as you age. So one healthy employees, yes, but GLP-1s also, once you go off of them, usually the weight comes right back on. So this is a long-term, trend essentially, and probably will only continue moving forward.
Before I respond to my comment, I'll go back to that. I appreciate Dr. Bitz's intro that it's not a judgment at all. It's just reviewing the landscape and talking about what the data tells us. But within that, I think, hearing your comment, I think some of the challenge, at least in the medical industry, and I'm not a doctor, but with like weight loss indication, certainly there's like the aspect of losing weight, but then like where in that does it prevent an illness? Does it kick the illness down the road further? Are they still going to be on Mechanicsburg's plan, or are you potentially saving money for Medicare? Those are some of the things I think that, to be transparent, that I think schools and other businesses have been talking about in relation to these types of coverages. So.
And some of these drugs over the next couple of years, as their patents change, there are articles floating that the prices are going to drop significantly over the next couple of years, but it still goes back to, the drug is being used for something other than, but as you said, you also run that risk of somebody that's losing weight, hopefully will mean that they'll have a healthier life, which means that there'll be less. So there's a lot of complications to it. The other thing is, this is not a Mechanicsburg only issue. We had similar conversations with the IU, and the IU is experiencing the same thing. Many of the school districts in general are experiencing the same thing, that they're seeing a trend like this that is happening, and that it's taking a bigger bite out of the budget. So it's not, just want to make sure it is not just a Mechanicsburg issue. It's more of an industry, and the school districts in general are all facing this similar challenge, and I'm sure businesses are also facing the similar challenges on how they're paying out claims.
There's no action items here related to this. This was really just about increasing awareness and understanding as we head into the budget season and continue to navigate what 26, 27 is going to look like. So you have copies there as well for your reference, and be able to continue to analyze this. Thanks for your great questions and your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Longwell. We'll move on to the second item, 3.02, which is the Facilities Improvement Grant application.
Mr. Hoff.
All right. As Mr. Hoffman joins us here at the front table, I'll maybe just introduce it at 50,000-foot view, and then he's available here to fill in the details, but also provide any answers to questions that the board may have. So as part of the state's last budget process, they included some funding for the Public School Facilities Improvement Grant. I was just thinking about the acronym, make sure I got that right. Ultimately, that is a competitive grant that's run through the Department of Community and Economic Development. School districts may apply in a competitive application process for funding for school facility projects. As the board may recall, we had applied a couple years ago for the middle school's HVAC, and were awarded a grant of about $1 million, I believe. And that ultimately helped us offset the cost of that facility upgrade. And so as the grant window is now open for another round of potential awardees or projects, we've kind of gone back and looked at our 3, 5, 7-year plans around facilities to say what project might marry up nicely with this grant opportunity. And so appreciate Mr. Hoffman's work in working with our engineer to kind of look at what that might look like for an HVAC upgrade at Northside Elementary. And so I'll give him the opportunity to talk a little bit about that, and we can talk about the steps associated with not only the item here on the agenda around a resolution, but ultimately the other steps associated with the grant application. So.
Sure. So as you know, we've been kind of going back and addressing some of those bigger HVAC needs that we have throughout the district that weren't addressed through construction. And we do have a plan, 2 to 3 to 5 year plan to do this. And with the opportunity to apply for the grant, we thought it was just a nice opportunity for us to use that, hopefully, towards one of our schools and replacing these outdated rooftop units, which is part of the HVAC system. We still have a few more schools we need to address, and we thought using the grant for one of these would just make a whole lot of sense, and we're just hopeful that we're successful in our application.
So the proposed project, I think Mr. Hoffman reminded me, is about $1.3 million is what Barry said was thinking.
Yes.
And for the board's some additional context around the grant, you may apply for up to 75% of the grant of the project cost, which is probably close to about $1 million. I will say this though, as much as I appreciate the additional funding the state put in the budget, they likely will not fund the full 75%. They didn't do that with the middle school or some of our neighboring districts that were awarded grants through this process. Again, appreciate that they put some more money back in to begin to adjust for facilities, but I also feel compelled to mention that it's not on the same order of magnitude of the old Plan-Con process where school construction was funded more robustly through that process. And so their answer to the Plan-Con process going away, at least in the last couple of years, has been this competitive grant process. And so our intention is to try to secure some funds in that way. And one of the first steps is getting a resolution from the board in support of the project. And there's some other steps we have to do administratively and working with our local legislators, but we would take those steps with the board's support of this. So
we would look to have this application on the next board meeting agenda for.
So where are those units at as far as lifespan is concerned? How long do they tend to last, and where are we at?
It's usually, excuse me, it's usually a 15 to 20 year lifespan. We were at 20.
So, okay.
Holding on.
And on borrowed time, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Getting close to the
And I think,
end.
when we were going through the construction process, we were very, we knew we had some years left. So there was a way to get as much life out of these as we possibly could, and create some space for other things with the money we had. So I think it was a good decision at the time, but we knew we had to come back and take care of this at some point. We're there. We're trying to chip away at this every year, every 2 years to get caught up.
And it kind of staggers the units too, so you're replacing part of the roof and part of the units.
Sure.
So we're looking, it's kind of a twofold. We have to do the replacement
at some point.
at some point, but we're also looking at, the other option is that we're looking at this grant as a possibility of helping reduce our cost out of pocket to do it. But ultimately, it has to get done.
Ultimately, it will have to get done.
Yeah, and in our view, we're seeing, we're still prioritizing different elements of the facilities over the next 2 or 3 years, and we would see this as one of the priorities, so the timing would be a little dependent. But if we got the grant, I think obviously that would certainly influence our thinking. And when we look at some of the facilities projects that are out there that we might need in the next 2, 3, 4 years, this one I think rose to the top in terms of it's a little bit of a chess game. We want to see what best positions us for the grant, in terms of a possibility to receive funding. And so this one I think stood out to us as a good possibility. So.
Good luck. I hope we get it.
Me too.
Any other questions? Okay, so we'll move this forward then. Thank you. All right, at this point, item 4 is curriculum, and item 4.01 is demographics presentation. Who are we?
A little more data for you. We've do the civil rights data survey with the federal government every few years, and after we get that information, we'd like to be able to bring it back. So Dr. Bowman's going to take us through some of that information and data for us.
Yeah, so I want to thank Mrs. Stern. Actually, she came into a cabinet meeting earlier in the year. She's our data and systems analysis administrator right across the hall here, and provided that demographic data. Dr. Bitts asked me to kind of present it tonight in a way that tells the story of Mechanicsburg, of kind of who we are, where we were, and where we're going. So that's what I'm going to try to do tonight. So we're going to do that more in the number sense, not the philosophical sense. because as a board, you have to see patterns, as I think you've vividly seen tonight through several different presentations. This one will be no different, but we will see some snapshots, hopefully, that will give you a clear picture of our student body and who we are. Yes, those are two of our own very students. Thank you to Mrs. Tracy Panzer for assisting me. Really looking at tonight, what does our demographic data tell us about who we are? And these surely are numbers, but I think the numbers paint a very vivid picture for us. So you'll see quickly that our student population is changing and rapidly. Starting first, looking overall at our enrollment trends, you'll see the note there. We've grown by a total of 912 students and approximately a 24% increase over the last decade. So from 2015 until now, an overall of a 20% increase, 24%. We have grown from, in detailed numbers, 3,854 in 2015-16 to now 4,766 in this school year. That's nearly a 1,000 student increase over a decade. So that 24% is represented by about 1,000 students.
If I might, Dr. Bowman, I'm always amazed by that 1,000 students. If you think about our intermediate unit, there are 5 individual school districts that are smaller than $1,000 or 1,000 per school district enrollment, not dollars. So it's almost like absorbing one of those 5 school districts into us over that time period. So
Appreciate the numbers guys. I work with 2 numbers guys, so this is
it's a team.
right up their alley. Yeah. Just as a conservative estimate, when you look at over that time too, just to point out, it's roughly a 0.5% increase annually, if you kind of were to plot that out over the 10-year time period. I'll point out, and I think rightfully so, Mr. Longwell astutely shared with you this evening about our feasibility study that we started as a district. Now, of course, I was not around, but I've got the historical context to share with you. About 2015, they started a feasibility study. And within that study, they started to see this very trend start to come to life. And so over that time, even some of the gentlemen sitting here who were instrumental in facilitating those facility upgrades to prepare for said enrollment trends, the district was very, I guess, fortunate to foreshadow not only these trends, but some other needs in the district within that study. So at the same time, we were preparing facilities for nearly 5,000 students. We were also looking at finishing those spaces. What kind of spaces are we going to need a decade out to support not only our students, but the academic programs, the activities, the facilities, maybe expanding facilities for activities. So it took a lot of forethought, and I think these numbers show you just how drastically the need was. Now we'll celebrate the diversity of the district, which I hope you know, but now you'll see it. This visual clearly shows over the last decade the increase that we've seen. So though it may only seem small as an 11% increase, that 11% increase is noted by an increase from 822 students to 1,523. So 11% in total, but all but double over the last decade. To narrow down a little bit even further, as we look at our different ethnicities in the district, we tried to highlight 3 main points here within the data. So again, you're going to see that overall enrollment increase in the bottom there. But as you look at the 3 main points there, our Asian population in particular has almost doubled proportionally. Those that are classified as multiracial students, they've grown steadily. So you'll see that steadily increase there over the years from 155 to 299. So a 6.27 over 10 years. And then our Black and Hispanic populations remain consistent contributors to the overall diversity of the district. So if you're looking at, again, the Black population, an increase of 10.72%, and the Hispanic population similar to that of the multiracial, a little bit more though at 7.74%. And you'll also note at the very bottom there, our white population actually decreased over that 10-year span, further increasing the diversity in the district. This snapshot here was really more just to kind of show you the diversity between where we start in our district and where they finish, and how that trend has changed as well over the last 10 years. You'll notice that 10 years ago, the population, the ethnically diverse population coming into Kindergarten Academy was at 22% of the overall population. Fast forward 10 years, that is now at 37% coming into Kindergarten Academy. Now imagine that's 10 years. Now if we were to forecast that, if that trend were to continue and we continue to see even incremental increases in the enrollment in Kindergarten Academy as terms of diversity, you're going to see that diversity increase even further as we continue to grow as a district. And you'll see that compared to the graduation rates too, it decreased a little bit over time, but you still see a 10% increase over that 10 years within the graduating class.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
So what are the implications of, what do you draw from that the drop from 37 to 27?
Yeah, I mean, it would be hard to pinpoint, I guess, exactly over 13 years, Dr. Lebo, but I would say, we have transient students, some that are here only part-time. They move in and out of the district, or even they're moving within the county or the region. So it could even also be cyber charter, or they're going homeschooling. They just choose a different option or a different path.
I think also what you see is that 10 years ago in kindergarten, the classes that we were bringing in were less diverse. And that cohort is obviously moving up. Now, obviously, that kindergarten class didn't make it to 12th grade there within the 10 years. But our classes coming in have traditionally been less diverse, but it's growing in diversity and are moving up. Obviously, growing a little bit in diversity as they go, because we do have older students that do move in. But
yeah,
kindergarten classes primarily.
So the numbers aren't reflecting the same cohort.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, that's a great call out. So if you were to look at that 22%, Dr. Lebo, and we were to look at it 10 years down the road, it might not quite be to 27% because that's not the graduating class of 2026, but it could maybe be at 24 or 25%. So it is trending that those classes are increasing over their time here, but within the 10 years, you're just seeing a difference within those graduation classes.
Okay, so it's not like you're tracking the kindergartner the whole way through.
Correct.
In that class.
So if we were to foreshadow maybe the kindergarten of 37% now coming in, like it could be 40% when they graduate in 13 years.
I was looking at that. I was trying to figure out, why is there a 10% drop from the time somebody enters till they graduate?
Yeah. Because ultimately, if you look at that, it's really a 5% increase. You go 22%. In 2015, it was 22%. That group is now 11th or 12th grade, and now they're at and this year they're at a 27%. So we've actually gone up 5% over that period of time, as opposed to it looking like we lost 10% from the kindergarten. So if you use that same logic, that kindergarten class of 37% might be a 45% in 10 years from now, or 10 or 12 years, and that will continue to trend up.
Yeah, that's helpful. I was not reading that.
That's a good question.
Appreciate it. So then to go into what I labeled our subset population growth, looking at our English learners, specifically our economically disadvantaged population, as well as special education. Now, just again, seeing that total enrollment, remind you, over the 10 years, it was a 24% increase. These populations over that same time period, you can see grew much more drastically. So our English learners have increased 194% over the last 10 years. economically disadvantaged 43%, and special ed 68%. So I'm gonna actually rely on a good friend of mine who might be Dr. Bitz to kind of help you understand this. He gave me a little story. So think of it this way. Say you had 10 students with 3 of them wearing red shirts. If the population of students grew to 100 and the proportional makeup of the group stayed the same, then you'd expect 30 students to have red shirts out of that 100. If you suddenly had 70 students with red shirts out of 100, then you know the growth of students with red shirts outpaced the growth of everyone else. So that really, as we were working through these numbers, my math friend, I told him my math wasn't mathing. He helped me math. That was a great story, I thought, that really put it easily in perspective. So those that understand numbers maybe better than others have a great way of telling a story to showcase that.
It's a great math word problem.
Or not.
So to put it another way, if our total enrollment went up 24% and everything went up proportionately,
Yep.
all those numbers would be 0%, right? So it would be 0%.
They'd be 24% as well.
Okay, sure.
Yeah,
Well,
they'd grow.
Yeah, okay.
They'd grow the same
Yeah.
amount as the regular.
Okay?
That word problem might be.
It helped me. I figured it would help you. Diving into our EL population, over the decade, nearly a 5% increase. So you're seeing here, we even kind of gave you a split, if you will, to see what it looked like in elementary and secondary. So you have grades 6 through 12 in both of those circles, as well as K to 5. So you're seeing that overall total represents that 5% increase, but you're also seeing the increase in secondary from 44 to 146, and in elementary from 79 to 211. So then remember that 211 in K to 5 is now. That number is going to keep going up as they get in through 6 through 12. The next data here is going to, again, highlight our English learners, but it's going to kind of create the visual for you of what it looked like before we did the reconfiguration of our grade level buildings in 2018, 2019. So prior to that date, all of our elementary schools were K to 5. In 2018, 2019, we reconfigured. So we now have 4 grades 1 through 3 buildings, and then Elmwood Academy in a 4-5 setup. So you're seeing that decade. So it didn't want to skew the data too much, but you're seeing the setup originally in 2015, 2016 at each of those buildings and what our L population looked like. Then 5 years after that, you're seeing that again. So you're actually seeing maybe even a little decrease in some areas. But again, remember, we're balancing out some of those schools because we reconfigured. So some of those totals are now being redistributed amongst different buildings. And then the 5-year trend from 2020 to now, you're seeing that significant increase.
Didn't the programs look different though? Also, I mean, Northside, that's where we had students, English learners, so that's why those numbers would be.
Correct. Yep.
So programs.
Yeah, we eliminated programming at Northside.
Right.
And obviously added it at Sheppin Upper Allen. And then between 2020 and 2025, we added the program at Broad Street. So that's why you can see Upper Allen actually decrease, because many of those students that were going to Upper Allen started going to Broad Street.
Yeah, and Broad Street was started in 23, 24. In terms of spoken languages, and I think I first heard this number last year and it blew me away. And honestly, I think it was crazy. I want to say it was 47 at the time. But as of this year, we have a total of 55 different languages spoken in the school community. And within just the English learner families, we have 34 different languages in Little Mechanicsburg. I remember looking at that picture that you guys showed of Mechanicsburg, and then you have the other big regional areas. But within our school community, those numbers hold true. I think that's pretty powerful.
So explain the difference between the the 55 and the 34, what?
So the 55 is the overall district, those that are not labeled as English learners. So we have students that are coming to the country that are not fluent in English. If they fall into the category of being an English learner family, those families constitute 34 of the overall 55 languages.
So you might have a student that's fluent in Greek, comes from Greece, but is also fluent in English, so they don't qualify as an L, but they.
All right, now looking at economically disadvantaged. We've actually remained pretty consistent. You'll see that over the last few years, approximately 40% in each of the last 3 years. But still growing slowly but steadily.
And that's defined by the government?
Yeah, so the caveat there, Dr. Lebo, good call out, is I would love to say that these numbers are completely accurate and representative of our community, but the reality is these numbers are only identifying the families that are willing to fill out the paperwork and qualify for the government subsidies of being free and reduced.
For a while, there was some direct access that was able to capture, I would suggest, a greater percentage of our families that fell into this category. But some of those direct access requirements have changed. So there are, again, an increasing number of folks who do have to reapply each year to get free and reduced lunch.
This could also be a function of these students that didn't necessarily move into the district, but the cost of living is now affecting them. Obviously.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors over over a 10-year period that are going to affect this for sure. Looking through a different lens here with this subset, we look at our different buildings here, and we look at the population growth, the building rate. So you're going to see it in our elementary schools. Again, starting out 10 years ago, not quite as drastic, but you're also seeing some decreases in some of those buildings over 10 years. Yeah, go ahead, Dr. Bitts.
I'll just point out so obviously orange is pre-reconfiguration. So if you just look at the orange for a second, you can see that among our elementary buildings, we had about a 32% gap between the percentage of economically disadvantaged in 2 of the buildings compared to economically disadvantaged in 2 of the others. So those of you that were on board or were involved with the district, you might remember one of the prongs that we said was critical in our reconfiguration was trying to close that gap. We wanted to have more equitable experience across our buildings. So you can see that we were able to achieve that because now if you kind of shift your eyes a little bit to looking from the orange to looking at the blue, now you can see that obviously those are much closer to one another in terms of certainly not being a 32% gap.
And you can kind of use, since everybody goes to Elmwood, you can kind of use that as the mean, right?
You're exactly right. For the blue anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, what is it that Mr. Undercoff likes to say? All roads lead to Elmwood. Appreciate that call, Dr. Bitts. And that last subset that we wanted to highlight tonight is our special education population. Again, looking at that 10-year growth to stay consistent. So 10 years ago, we had 489 students, roughly 12.69% that required services. That grew not quite 3% in total over a 5-year span to 658. And then over that next 5 years, a total of 10 years, we increased roughly 6% to now being 869 students. So again, the percentage may look somewhat incremental, but you're looking at the overall total students there of, again, all nearly doubling.
Now, there was a statistic, I think, last year, there was something like over the last 12 years, we went from like 10% special education, and we're trending towards nearly 20%.
Yeah, the 18.23, and I believe the state is right around
Yes, I believe, I have to pull up that exact number, but we're right about the state average.
But we still, I mean, we're not exactly sure if that is diagnosis or is that some other external factors that are.
Right, so again, depending on who the student is, those are students that either we qualify as special ed through evaluation, or some of those students come to us and they're already evaluated and they already have a disability.
And a few things to keep in mind, in 2013 is when like the DSM-5 came on board with like an expanded definition of autism, which qualified and obviously impacted special education. And then just with the rise of awareness and this generation of parents being more proactive and seeking evaluations, I think that's probably reflected as well.
Less stigma against.
Yeah.
I just think schools too, over time, we've become much more well-equipped
Yeah.
to service
and
the variety of needs that our students come with.
Yeah, I mean, my son was identified in daycare, like at age 3, that he needed, like, you know, maybe seek out speech therapy. So we sought out speech therapy, and getting him in speech at age 3 is when it's like, hey, maybe we should do an evaluation. And so just the early identifying in daycare and in kindergarten and being open to those, I think, again, I'm a generation of parent that is more open to that than my parent, you know, might have been. But.
Sure, and we also have the collaborative approach through the consortium, and so you're seeing school districts work together to best serve our students that have these kind of disabilities. All right, continuing with this group of students, looking at the evaluations and reevaluations. So again, it might be a point at which you reevaluate a student, whether it's because they've been in our district for the required number of years, or it's because a student's coming to us and we need to do a reevaluation. They're seeing those trends overall, again, increasing, and just even the numbers. So the percentages and the numbers are increasing over those years. If I look, I think in every category, roughly, other than maybe gifted. And again, there's gifted shifted too, where schools now are adjusting IQ scores, like where do students fall? Are we overclassifying gifted? Are we underclassifying gifted? And you're seeing a lot of school districts adjust that. So over a 10-year time, that's changed as well.
I think this one, it's important to remember the outlier was actually the 2020, 2021. That was the hybrid year. So when you looked at discipline was down, the evaluations were down. We didn't see students as much. So so that one, as opposed to thinking, oh, what happened to the trend there? There's probably a pretty good explanation for why that one was down.
And I included in this one of note was 24-25 last year, because those are final numbers. Looking at this year, obviously, we don't have a total number yet because we're not through the year. So those numbers will change by the time we finish out the school year. Okay, and lastly, breaking down the various disability groups and where those numbers fall. So you're going to see the 3-year bands within each disability category. So if you don't, for example, deaf and blindness, you see a 1 there for 15-16. That means we just didn't have students that fell into that disability category in 2021 or currently during this school year. So you can see the overall trends in those numbers of student support is increasing. And you can see specifically over the last 10 years, the disability categories that have grown are autism, specific learning disabilities, and other health impairments.
Are there some examples of what the other health impairments?
So that could be ADHD. I didn't ask Mrs. Bott specifically, but specific learning disabilities, that's where your math, your reading, those academic specific deficiencies usually fall. The other health impairments are the ones that fall outside of that might be more medically focused, like ADHD.
ODD, any kind of behavior thing that we can't, if school psych with that eval hasn't quite pinned down, but we know there's something that's impacting their social emotional learning. So, yeah, OHI, it covers a lot, but
Catch-all.
yeah, when you're kind of like, something is going on, and we've run all the evaluations and all the tests, and we still don't know, but this child is still having a really challenging time learning and being supported in learning.
Thank you.
All right, so to kind of wrap this up a little bit, looking at the signals and impacts overall of our demographic data, knowing that this data will continue to influence these 4 categories listed, which we all are a part of. You especially as the board, but our long-range facilities planning, you're seeing evidence of that in many of our board meetings. Our budget prioritization, which you've learned a lot about tonight and will continue to learn about over the next month or 2. Our program evaluations, which we do on a regular basis, and again, focusing on the needs of the students within those programs. And then comprehensive planning, we're up, I think, it's either next year or the year after we're up again. I don't know, needless to say, we have continued doing it. Right. The state makes us do it so many times, but as school districts, we do it. That's what we live by. We do it all the time. But needless to say, this data is something that continues to be a priority and a focus for us within those 4 things that kind of, we eat, sleep, and breathe by. And lastly, you saw this earlier, but you didn't see. Mr. Longwell didn't even know that I was bringing this out. But this is something that was new to me coming here. But it really is something that we live by when you really look at it. It's the lens through which we really focus our success upon. So living and dying by our mission and vision and our shared beliefs. And then building off of that into our curriculum, assessment, and instructional system, who we hire, and then all of our policy structures and resource allocation. And again, what is all that for? It's for our students. It's for the students that comprise the data that we just looked at tonight. And they're going to continue to change, and we're going to continue to evolve with them. So I appreciate everything that you do as a board. I said it earlier tonight. I'll say it probably again as long as I'm here. We are fortunate, and I say that from experience of the board and the support and the leadership that we have in this district, because it doesn't exist everywhere else. So thank you. We appreciate your time and effort and your leadership and your advocacy for our students.
So
Any
again,
questions?
No particular action items with this one either, but obviously just framing the conversation of some budgetary conversations that will come, and certainly as you look at those increasing special ed numbers, increasing L numbers, that comes with the need for support. So we'll continue to discuss that in the coming meetings.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman.
Thank you.
It's always, you always know that the demographics are changing, but when you start to look at the numbers and start to pull it apart a little bit and understand it a little better, it really hits. So thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to, still in curriculum, we're going to move on to 4.02, which is curriculum maps for business, computer, and information technology.
We'll actually kind of combine these 2 together because Mrs. Tasha Clever is going to be coming up to share with us about both these, has a great presentation for us. She's been working really hard with both departments on continuing to help them get their curriculum up to speed. We've been able to hear about some of the cool courses that we've been adding in these different areas, but now looking at trying to solidify their curriculum maps as well. So Ms. Clever.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here today. I do not have any data for you, so
I'm sorry.
Hopefully that's okay. So I'll start by just talking a little bit about sort of our foundation for developing our new curriculum, where we started in terms of our vision. First and foremost, we were looking to implement some opportunities for deeper, more rigorous learning experiences in both FCS and BCIT that moved beyond some of the more surface level acquisition of skills and knowledge, which really leads into that second point of relevance to giving students more meaningful, authentic learning experiences that allow them to apply their skills in real life contexts, to really prepare them for not only life, but future careers, and ultimately to prepare them to be responsible citizens in whatever community they become part of when they leave us. And then finally, that third goal is about clarity, and what you'll see when I go over some things today is that these content areas are a little bit unique in that they sort of have sub-content areas within them, and so we were looking to create learning goals, transfer goals, and understandings that really applied to each of those areas. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And I apologize, your agenda says BCIT first, but I'm actually going to start with FCS. And I want to start with just a little bit of history and looking at how the department has changed a little bit and evolved over time. So if you think back to the 1920s, 1950s, I know none of you young people were around then, but at that point it was called home economics, home ec. And the emphasis was really on teaching women home management skills like cooking, sewing, a little bit of budgeting. And in the 60s and 70s, that's where we first start to see it called family and consumer sciences. And the emphasis expands to life skills for all students rather than just female students in particular, which really was a reflection of changing family structures and an increased participation in the workforce. You also see at that time an expansion of the curriculum to include topics like family dynamics, nutrition, and child development. In the 80s and 90s, we see more of a focus on design, not just sewing, but also a focus on home and interior design. And we also see more of a shift from home management to personal life management. So we really see the consumer economics part of that program expand a little bit more and have a larger focus. Today, we've seen a lot more evolution. The FCS Educators Association highlights the shifting focus of many modern curriculums and FCS programs, more of a concern with integrating career and industry-specific skills along with everyday life skills, design thinking, which we see in many areas, and also a focus on concepts like sustainability, equity, wellness, and also a focus on meaningful community contribution, which was something we really tried to instill as we were creating our goals. So in terms of what this looks like at Mechanicsburg, our 6th through 12 experience for students, all 6th and 7th graders take FCS, and then in 8th grade they get the option. It's one of the encore options that they get to choose as an elective. In 9th through 12th grade, they have the opportunity to take several different electives, and our FC electives are very popular. So we have child development 1 through 3, 2 and 3 are the courses where they get the on-campus lab experience with the preschool students. And then the culinary electives are food foundations, advanced foods, and global kitchen. Design, we have fashion, interior, and then we also have advanced textiles. And then there's also an adulting 101 course that's more focused on the consumer economics portion.
Do you teach taxes in your class?
So taxes would fall under our personal finance course, yeah. So keeping in mind sort of the evolution of that content area and of course our desire for a more rigorous and relevant student learning experience, these are the 3 transfer goals that we developed. And just to give you sort of something to compare this to, our last, I think, approved curriculum maps, we had 4 transfer goals with a total of 16 understandings. We really were trying to pare that down to the most important aspects of skills and knowledge that we wanted students to learn, and so we ended up with 3 transfer goals with 3 understandings each. I like things to be round numbers, so I'm going to just briefly take you through each of these transfer goals. You will notice that they tend to be a little bit broader in terms of the language used. That is intentional, again, because of the multiple content areas. So for example, in FCS, we have content related to, of course, culinary, we have design, we have consumerism, and we have child development. So we're trying to develop goals that really hit all of those areas. I will also try to give you some examples of what this actually looks like in the student experience. So bear with me, I'll try to give you a range of examples, middle through high school. So transfer goal 1 is really about practices that contribute to individual and collective welfare. So safety and ethics, communication, and human development. The example for this one I'm very excited about. Our advanced foods course at MASH, starting next year, will be offering students the opportunity to earn their ServSafe food handler certification credential. So if they are either already working in the food service industry or they have an interest to do so, that's a credential that they can actually apply right away. It's not something that they have to wait till they graduate to use. In some cases, that earns them a raise depending on where they're working. And it just looks good on an application or a resume if they're seeking employment. So that's a cool opportunity. That is part of a unit focus on kitchen safety and industry safety. That would be the performance task, is the opportunity to earn that credential. So transfer goal 2 is really about resources. And again, I know that's a broad term. So when we're talking about resources, that might be financial resources. If we're talking about consumer economics, it might be material resources like design materials or culinary ingredients, nutritional elements that you need to consider when you're meal planning. All of those things we're thinking of when we're talking about resources. And so a couple of examples, and I'm sorry, I skipped ahead here. The understandings are related to sustainability, equity, and then that general resource management. So what are you doing with the things that you have? And so 7th graders, they do a pretty cool project where after a unit where they're learning about upcycling and recycling, they actually create a sewing project from secondhand materials. And then I'll give this example. Our 7th grade is doing a shared performance task with BCIT and Tech Ed. And so they're all learning about this idea of biodiversity and pollinators, and then each course will contribute something different towards solving that problem. So right now they're thinking through what that could be through the lens of this transfer goal, and they're considering doing seed packets for native pollinators. And so that's a pretty cool activity that we might see come out of this goal. Transfer goal 3 is really about design. And again, that could be from the culinary lens, designing a recipe, a meal plan, an event menu. From the design lens, it might be designing a space or a wardrobe or a fashion line. And then from the child development lens, Jenny Brokenshire actually has her students learn how to design lesson plans using our UVD format. And so they're considering things like instructional strategies and what they know about human development as they're factoring in how they design those lessons for students. All right, I'm going to pause at this point and just give you a second to ask any questions you might have about FCS before we move on to BCIT.
I'm trying to open these again. I did look at them at home just for fun. But so are those the understandings over here?
Yes, to the right are the understandings.
They were different for every transfer goal?
Correct. Yes.
In FCS?
Correct.
And then you're going to do different ones for these?
Yes.
Where they're the same?
Different transfer goals, different understandings.
In every, so every transfer goal has different understandings in BCIT? Or
the transfer goals are different themselves. So there are 3 transfer goals for FCS, but BCIT has 4 transfer goals. They're different. Different transfer goals and understandings.
And I'll wait till you talk about that one.
That's okay. Yeah.
I thought they were all, when I looked at them, I thought they were all the same, all the understandings.
No,
so
they have some similarities, but yeah, that might be why.
I can't open them. I'm trying. Thanks. Oh, the other thing, I'm sorry. The other thing I did notice, and I think it was with FCS and BCIT, so I'll jump ahead. Sometimes you looked at national standards in addition to the state. Is there a reason you did that?
Yes. So for FCS in particular, the last time the state updated their standards, I think, was 2013. So they're just a little bit outdated.
Right.
The middle school maps I mostly pulled from the state standards, but when you get to high school and the more specialized electives, it was easier and better to pull from the national standards because they were a bit more aligned to our content.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I will just reference again those three things I talked about in the beginning, the increased rigor, relevance, and then the clarity. Those were the same goals that we had going into the development of the curriculum level goals for BCIT. As far as evolution of this particular program, we really didn't see business education in public schools until the mid-20th century, when the focus was mostly on clerical skills like typewriting, bookkeeping to support entry-level employment. And then in the 70s and 90s, we start to see certified business educators and expanded curriculum areas, so things like accounting and marketing showing up in school curriculum. Early 21st century, excuse me, with the rise of technology in the workplace, we see technology and computing becoming essential skills integrated within traditional business topics rather than treated as separate silos. And in modern BCIT programs, we've seen even more expansion. So we've seen BCIT curriculum now integrates industry-aligned practices, emerging technologies, things like cybersecurity, data analysis, design thinking, ethical technology use, and also a continued emphasis on career pathways, innovation, and lifelong learning. So I would say overall what we've seen with BCIT education programs is a movement from teaching how to use tools to empowering students to use those tools in order to analyze and innovate and create within a constantly evolving atmosphere. I also want to clarify that BCIT, as far as the acronym goes, Business, Computers, and Information Technology, for us in particular, we do have computer programming courses. Those fall under the umbrella of our math department. And so when I'm going over the curriculum learning goals and also the courses that we offer, you'll see that the focus is mostly on that business element. Any of our focus in terms of computers and information technology is within the context of business, not necessarily those topics on their own. And so this is what the experience looks like here at Mechanicsburg. 6th through 8th, this is guaranteed and viable, so we have students take this elective every year. And then 9th through 12, I added in here just because there's a lot of overlap in terms of our staff for teaching these courses. 9th and 11th graders take career development, and 10th and 12th graders take personal finance. As you know, because you approved them, those are separate curriculum maps. We do not pull from the goals that I'll show you today. The electives that do pull from these maps would be Intro to Business, Advanced Business, Digital Marketing, Accounting, Entrepreneurship, and then there's also a Day 6 elective that's Investing. Okay, and I lied to you, Julie. There are 3 transfer goals. There are 4 understandings for each of these transfer goals. So again, BCIT was last updated in, I think, 2016, and as we know, a little bit has changed in that realm over the past 10 years, so we were in a little bit of a need for an upgrade. So these are the 3 transfer goals, and as I did with FCS, I'll just take you through each of those, talk a little bit about the understandings, and try to give you an idea of what this looks like for the student experience. This first transfer goal is really about systems. Again, broad term, so when we're talking about systems, that might be businesses or companies, accounting systems, marketing systems, computer systems, economic systems, and so I think what you'll see at the curriculum level is a broader view of the content area, and as we trickle down into the understandings And then the unit level, you'll see that get more specific in terms of what students are actually learning. So there are 4 understandings. One of those is related to really how understanding the consumer helps us create more human-centered systems. Digital literacy, a knowledge of digital literacy in terms of increasing the efficacy of those systems, how we develop the systems in order to promote more sustainable growth, and then the interconnectedness of systems in general. The example that I'll give you here is in 8th grade, students will design and pitch an idea to investors for an app that solves a real world problem. So that's one of the things that they do that's a little bit more computer oriented at the middle level.
So by systems, that could be procedures that are not necessarily computer systems.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Transfer goal 2 is really about data. So I don't have any data, but we are going to talk about it very briefly. So the understandings here are related to making meaning of data, right? And so when Dr. Bowman and Mr. Longwell were trying to sort of make sense of that data for you and tell a story, that's what we want students to be able to do, is to look at that data and be able to communicate what it means to somebody else. Using digital tools, leveraging those tools in order to analyze, store, communicate something about data, synthesize it, and then record keeping, in particular, not just knowing how to keep records, but understanding why it's important to have accurate and transparent records. And then understanding that data itself can be unreliable. And so when we're thinking about what data means, really thinking about the nuance and context that comes with that data. The example that I'll give for this is accounting. After a unit on fraud and embezzlement, auditing procedures, reconciliation of accounts. I've had to learn what all of this means. It's fascinating. This teacher has students take on the role of auditors, and then he gives them an actual company, and they complete a simulation in which they audit that company's financial records.
I'm saying I like it.
I thought maybe you would, yeah. You want an intern? Transfer goal 3 is really about the ethical and legal aspect of business and decision making. So we have understandings related to equity, related to social responsibility, digital citizenship, and then the last one is the legal frameworks. And so students in digital marketing, I'll give this example, they learn about the ethics of advertising and how we get consumers to want to buy things. We see that, of course, being more relevant than ever with the use of social media. And those students will then participate in a simulation that asks them to create marketing plans that follow regulatory guidelines and align with the company's mission statements that they'll create. So those are the examples I have. I'll end by saying that really the hope for both FCS and BCIT is that a curriculum built with all of these learning goals as a foundation will result in a learning experience that better prepares students for the realities of life and work, and really produces citizens that are more productive and thoughtful and responsible in our communities. Hopefully this one, but any that they prefer. So. Do you have any questions that I can answer?
I think the 10-minute presentation doesn't do justice to just the depth of understanding and work that Mrs. Klepper has taken the teams through. Tasha has done a brilliant job of being able to pull all these pieces together into some coherent curricula for really for the betterment of those teachers and for the students. So well done, Ms. Klepper.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We are now going to move on to item 5, which is facilities. And the first one is 5.01, masonry repair for Elmwood Academy. And I guess you're going to kind of take all 3 of them?
Yeah, we can do that.
We'll do them.
Yeah, so the masonry repair at Elmwood is, it's very similar to what we did at the middle school this past year. We had an evaluation done on the building. We knew we had some problematic spots, and they came up with a proposal. And as you can see there, it's a lot, and it's well needed, especially with a building as old as Elmwood is. So that the areas that we're hitting the most would be the hallway going down to the cafeteria, and the front section near the gym, which have a lot of vertical walls that absorb moisture and rain and get sucked into that brick and drip on the floor. So that's what we'd like to address.
Any questions on that?
I was just going to mention, I think this gets into the building envelope, making sure we're securing it against weather and rain, and this will help with everything from flashing to repointing to, just making sure the exterior walls are watertight where they need to be. So.
And you said that's handling the entire side of it, or just the?
They did an evaluation of the entire building, not the entire building is included in the proposal because it wasn't necessary.
Any objections to moving this forward? All right, thank you.
So roof warranty at Elmwood, this is not the entire roof. As you know, Elmwood is split into many, many roofs. I think there's 20 to 30 sections of roof with different lifespans and where they're at with the lifespans of that roof. So these 3 sections, I believe, they're at the end of their life cycle, which we evaluate and say, do we need to recoat? These sections are in pretty good shape, so rather than spending $100,000 to recoat a roof that maybe doesn't need it quite yet, we'd like to extend a warranty to keep that same coverage and see if we get a little bit more life out of these sections of roofing.
And on that one as well, any questions, comments? Any objections to moving it forward? All right, thank you.
And then the roof replacement at the middle school, these are 3 areas. They're high peak areas, shingled roofs that are the original shingles from 2002 school. And they're just at the end of their life. We got a lot of them that are starting to peel off. So take care of them. Come back again in another 25 years talking about it.
Questions? Any objections to moving that forward as well? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, we will move on to personnel, 6.01, memorandum of understanding with the Wildcat Foundation.
Yeah, we mentioned, I think, back in a previous foundation report about this being something that we were looking into with the foundation. It's long been a topic of discussion just to formalize what already exists. So the MOU doesn't create any new expectations of the district. Again, it really just formalizes the services and provisions that we give to the foundation now. But this, again, just at least formalizes it in the document. So we would approve this, and actually the foundation board has been reviewing it for the month. So actually the foundation board would approve it on the first Friday of March, and then we would potentially be approving it on the 10th.
One question at the beginning, it says this day, September 2025, is it just need to be updated?
No, probably just need to update that, yeah.
Yeah. Other questions?
So I would just say it's a great partnership, and I know the foundation appreciates all the district does for the foundation. It's very supportive.
And we appreciate everything that the foundation does for the district as well. So it works out well.
Team effort.
Yes. All right. Then, based on the outcome from their review, we'll move it forward to potentially for the next meeting. Okay. We'll move down to item 7, which is policy, and we have a collection of policies to cover. 7.01 is the first reading of revised policy 105.2, exemption from instruction, and then we also have 7.02, which is first reading of the revised board policy 137.1, district program participation by home education students. 7.03, which is the first reading of revised board policy 218.1, weapons, And then 7.04, which is the first reading of revised board policy 346, workers' compensation.
Hi everybody, I'm going to talk about 105.2 and 137.1, and then I think I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Bowman for the other two. So 105.2 is a PSBA recommended policy update. It's based off of two recent Supreme Court hearings, court findings, court rulings, there we go, court rulings is the word I was looking for, of Mahmoud versus Taylor and Tatel versus Mount Lebanon. So where I used to teach like many, many years ago. Love seeing my schools in the Supreme Court. But
Not this one, please.
No, not this case in particular. But basically, these updates are not really substantial in terms of the policy, but more vocabulary. So you'll see under the authority, and you'll see it throughout the policy, they've added that it's sincerely held religious and moral beliefs, where it used to be you could be exempt from instruction for religious beliefs. The Supreme Court ruling utilized that vocabulary of sincerely held and or moral beliefs. That's the ruling that they used in the court case specifically for Tatel versus Mount Lebanon. And then there's just some general terminology like the under delegation of responsibility. That's moved up, like that whole wording is the same wording we had under guidelines before, they just moved it up under delegation of responsibilities. And then again, you'll go through and see that sincerely held religious and moral belief is utilized over and over again. And then we changed up, some of the codes were changed as well with that policy. So it's not a huge substantial change to the policy, but that vocabulary is very important for us when we start thinking about like our administrative regulations that we do. But bringing that forward for you all for consideration.
That's what I was going to ask. Is it actually going to change anything procedurally as far as what's expected from the parents?
Yeah, we have done some things procedurally that once the policy is approved, that will roll out for the procedural aspect of it.
I don't remember, does this also apply to the testing, or is there a separate exempt policy for testing?
There's a separate exemption policy for testing.
Didn't change that,
No.
It doesn't, I was going to say, it doesn't make it more
testing,
difficult to exempt.
It doesn't, say that again, I'm sorry.
It doesn't make it more difficult to exempt out of things, so, yeah, actually, the sincerely held religious and or moral beliefs actually broadens, so.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then looking at 137.1, this is actually a district recommended update based off of some procedural changes that we have. In speaking with our solicitor, we had all home education students register with the district previously. Under solicitor advice, not having all home education students register within our student information system. They still register with the office, but they have different requirements than when they register within the district. So this update here is specifically for home education students wishing to enroll in co-curricular or extracurricular activities. Because they will be coming into district buildings, we actually need more information from them than what we do if they were just home education students. So we're just pointing out in there, because we're not making all home education students register within the district through our student information system. It's pointing out that if they are participating in our programs of extracurricular or co-curricular activities, they will have to go through the registration process. Any questions on 137.1?
If kids withdraw and become homeschooled, do we take them out of our system?
We don't take them out, but we
Just
mark them off and make them inactivated.
There's some things moving through the House about the cyber charter and academic. This is different.
This is different. So this is if a parent wants to be in charge of the curriculum instruction of their child, they're not going to an external source like a K or a CCA or something to that level. So, but people often confuse cyber schooling and home education because kids in both cases are home, but cyber schooling externally, somebody else chooses what you learn.
Sure.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Dr. Bowman, you have the other two?
Thank you, sir. Yeah, 218.1, again, not too many drastic changes there, but this is in response to some state regulations that were just handed out regarding notifications. when we have a weapons policy violation within the district. So you'll notice in the policy really changing the reporting categories that are now listed. And they go through the different scenarios there too, whether if it happens in the school building, if that school building is attached to another grade level or building, which, for example, if it were here at Kindergarten Academy, we would have to determine if we have to notify people of district office or not. Like, those are the kind of things that we now are required to consider and then potentially communicate. And again, if it happens on a school-sponsored activity or transportation to or from, we then have to identify the impacted parties and who all would need that communication. So the policy is updated to include those definitions and those different scenarios. And it also then, the accompanying legal citations were updated accordingly.
Any questions on that policy? Okay.
All right, next one, on behalf of Mrs. Stata, presenting this to you. A few, again, minor changes here that really reflect some internal procedural changes that we want to put in place to provide some additional flexibility for our people. You'll note in the policy there, specifically, we're changing it from 12 to 48 hours for them to report an incident, identifying the specific office, the Human Resources Office, to whom they would report it, and then also talking about how the benefits would play out on if one of those incidences were to occur. So further defining the details of that, so we're clear as kind, right, Mr. Longwell? Just providing clarity as to the days that they would have to take when an incident like that would occur.
Any questions on that policy?
Is that in alignment with our workers' comp coverage? I mean, they provided those details.
It will still align. Yep.
Okay. Any objection to moving these four collectively forward to a second reading, most likely in our board meeting in March? Okay, so moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that wraps up the working session for this evening. Thank you for your time.